안녕하세요. 매일매일 운동하기를 실천하고 있는 동타왕호입니다. 이 영상을 틀기 전에 충격적인 소식이 하나 들어왔습니다. 구독자가 100명에서 99명으로 한 명 누구야? 한 명 누구야? 잡아오세요. 취소한 사람 잡아와요 빨리. 제가 출근해서 핸드폰 다 검사합니다. 안되겠네. 오늘은 월요일이에요. 오늘도 코로나 확진자가 100명이 넘었죠. 원래 내일부터 학원을 가려고 했는데 고민입니다. 그냥 어차피 이렇게 안 끝날 것 같으니까 그냥 정부에서는 1단계를 내렸으니까 그냥 학원을 다닐까. 다음 주까지 오후 출근이거든요. 이번 주도 오후 출근, 다음 주도 오후 출근. 그 다음부터는 이제 아침 출근이어서 퇴근하고 영어 학원을 가는 스케줄이에요. 그래서 다음부터 갈까 고민입니다. 일단 오늘은 미세먼지가 좀 낀 건지 하늘이 좀 뿌예요. 그래서 저는 지금 이불 빨래를 하고 있습니다. 일단 운동하고 할 것도 없어요. 운동하고 집에서 드라마나 봐야겠습니다.
An oceanic capital open wide to the world. A city of opportunity for successful business, with a convenient environment and infrastructure for overseas financial companies to achieve active and efficient business in the rapidly changing global environment. Busan, maritime finance and derivatives hub of Northeast Asia, the future of global finance.
A lot about the person who wears it, but even more about the person who doesn't.
Typhoon Malave has made landfall in the Philippines, forcing thousands to evacuate their homes and others to shelter in place. Just have a look at that mass there. The storm projected to hit Vietnam by late Tuesday. The whole region seeing an especially severe rainy season this year. Meteorologist Pedram Javaheri joins us now with more. Tracking yet another major storm in the Gulf of Mexico.
That as well, correct. Active season across the Gulf of Mexico, certainly, and much the same across portions of Asia as well that we'll touch on momentarily. But we're talking about 21, of course, named storms in the National Hurricane Center list that were indicated in the blue. Every single one of those names has been used and expired. And you'll notice the ones indicated in red, the previous 6 here, now pushing our total up to 27 named storms in 2020. That's now tied with the busiest single season on record going back to 2005. So an incredible run of this pattern here when it comes to the storms that we've experienced in recent days. But the perspective as such, looks like I'm losing connection. I don't know if you can still see it, but the tropical storm Zeta now is the storm we're following when it comes to our next system, poised to become a hurricane, a Category 1 equivalent hurricane. And the forecast guidance on this particular storm does want to take it eventually along the Gulf Coast region, make landfall along the coast of Louisiana. But our friends across Mexico on alert after just 3 weeks ago, we had Hurricane Delta make landfall in this region. Now we have what is forecast to be Hurricane Zeta making landfall across the area within the next, say, 18 or so hours as a Category 1 system. We have hurricane warnings prompted across the Yucatan region. But again, once we get through this, the system is expected to reemerge over the Gulf of Mexico. Beyond this, it'll potentially maintain its intensity as it approaches the Gulf Coast and then possibly weaken right as it approaches land Wednesday afternoon. But really, quite a bit of variability as far as the model guidance is concerned with this particular setup. You'll notice back to the left of your screen, the American model suggests a much stronger storm, potentially a little bit later into the afternoon and evening hours, while off towards the right side of the screen, that is a weaker storm based on the European model's guidance. But you kind of break down the model by model comparison, you see the uncertainties as often is the case as the water temperatures cool, become gradually less and less conducive for tropical development. The steering environment also, Michael, shifts a little bit. So that's an area we're watching carefully for quite a bit of wet weather over the coming several days, once again with another landfalling system.
All right, Pedram, thank you very much. Pedram Javaheri will check in with you next hour. Thanks for that. Now in Portugal, a record-breaking performance by Formula One driver Lewis Hamilton, the six-time world champion, dominated the Portuguese Grand Prix on Sunday, earning the 92nd victory of his career and thereby breaking Michael Schumacher's all-time win record. After the race, Hamilton said he never could have dreamed of being in that moment. Hours earlier, Hamilton went on Twitter to share his thoughts on the violent protests in Nigeria, posting a photo of himself wearing a shirt that calls for the end of police brutality and the disbanding of the nation's special anti-robbery squad. All right, I'm Michael Holmes. Thanks for spending part of your day with me. I'll have another hour of CNN Newsroom right after the break.
Oasis in the western Egyptian desert is the very definition of perfect isolation. This remote place of stunning natural beauty lures tourists with the promise of relaxation and rejuvenation.
Siwa is offering many kinds of wellness activities.
Many come for the famed sand treatments, but then find the Oasis has more to offer.
People asking more for the salt treatment. Salt is very good for lungs, for all the breathing system in the body.
Freshwater springs, rich in sulfur, are believed to possess restorative qualities.
It's very, very good for the body, skin, the joints, the hair.
Siwa Oasis is a destination that's off the beaten track, but the lure of its spas and treatments entices tourists to take the road less travelled.
Hey, is that an elefunky?
Hey there, guys. Any room in the middle?
No.
Okie dokie.
people are still yearning to travel, but they're traveling differently than they used to. They're not crossing borders, they're not traveling for business, but what they're doing is they're getting in a car and they're going 200 or 300 miles to nearby destinations and they're staying in homes. What the guests have told us is they'd rather be in the private space of an Airbnb than a crowded hotel lobbies or crowded elevators. And one of the things we did is we brought in the former Surgeon General of the United States, Dr. Vivek Murthy, and we worked with him to develop this enhanced cleaning protocol, which is basically cleaning guidelines the host can get trained on and go through. More than 1 million listings have already gone through the cleaning guideline, and we're working really, really hard for this. But what we're hearing is people don't want to stay in crowded cities. They want to have a home to themselves, and this is why I think homes are becoming a really, really popular way for people to travel.
I'm David McKenzie in Goma, Eastern DRC, and this is CNN.
Staying the course, despite top aides testing positive for the coronavirus, the US Vice President will not leave the campaign trail. Americans are energized for the US presidential election as early voters cast ballots in record numbers. And the United States and Europe both seeing spikes in the virus. We go live to France, where they are seeing a new record number of cases for a fourth day in a row. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our viewers in the United States and all around the world. I'm Michael Holmes. You're watching CNN Newsroom. Days remaining in the US election season, the country is enduring its worst stretch of the coronavirus pandemic. For the seventh straight day, it has confirmed more than 58,000 new infections, with a couple of days well over 80,000 thrown in the mix. And once again, the virus hitting the White House. CNN has learned at least 5 people close to the vice president have tested positive, among them Mike Pence's chief of staff and one of his closest aides. Pence was in close contact with some of those staff members, but his office says he has so far tested negative and is so far refusing to quarantine. Instead, he held a campaign rally in North Carolina and plans to hold more up until Election Day.
But we're all standing out here in the rain for one reason and one reason only. And that is that North Carolina and America need 4 more years of President Donald Trump in the White House.
And President Trump was also on the campaign trail rallying support in Maine. He was asked if the vice president's refusal to quarantine was a good idea. The White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, meanwhile, also defending the Vice President's decision to continue campaigning, but admitting the nationwide outbreak is getting out of hand.
Here's what we have to do. We're not going to control the pandemic. We are going to control the fact that we get vaccines, therapeutics, and other mitigation
Why aren't we going to get control of the pandemic?
Because it is a contagious virus, just like the flu.
Yeah, but why not make efforts to contain it?
Well, we are making efforts to contain it.
By running all over the country, not wearing a mask? That's what the vice president's doing.
We can get into the back and forth. Let me just say this. Is what we need to do is make sure that we have the proper mitigation factors, whether it's therapies or vaccines or treatments, to make sure that people don't die from this.
Well, the Vice President, who we should remember is also the head of the White House Coronavirus Task Force, brought some energy to a Sunday rally while at the same time breaking his own administration's public health guidelines. CNN's John Harwood with more about the confusing messaging.
Events on Sunday encapsulated the dilemma facing President Trump and his campaign with just over a week to go before Election Day. The president was campaigning in both Maine and New Hampshire, insisting we're rounding the corner on the pandemic, appearing without masks or social distancing, getting very close to voters. But reality intruded with a major outbreak of coronavirus with people close to the vice president, including his chief of staff, Mark Short, as well as his body man, the one who travels most closely with Mike Pence. Now, despite that, the White House continued to have Mike Pence out on the campaign trail. He disregarded CDC guidelines, did not quarantine himself. The White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, confessed in a conversation with Jake Tapper that we can't control the pandemic. We're simply waiting for therapeutics and a vaccine. The challenge, of course, is for the president. The coronavirus pandemic is the #1 issue for voters, and they have a harsh judgment of the president's handling of it. Nevertheless, he's pressing on. He ended the evening on Sunday with a trick-or-treat Halloween event at the White House, the president appearing without a mask. However, he was not handing out the candy itself. That was done by White House staffers who were wearing masks and gloves in a different location. John Harwood, CNN, the White House.
Democratic vice presidential candidate Kamala Harris was back on the campaign trail this weekend. The difference with her is she cancelled all travel a week ago after 2 people in her orbit tested positive for the virus. Sunday in Michigan, Harris criticising the vice president for ignoring the advice of his own health experts and refusing to quarantine.
He should be following the guidelines. We're doing it. I think we have modeled the right and good behavior, and they should take our lead. We are breaking records for the number of people that are contracting a deadly virus. And this administration fails to take personal responsibility or responsibility in terms of leading the nation through this dangerous and deadly mass casualty event. And that's why they have forfeited their right to a second term in office.
Now, Harris made multiple campaign stops in Michigan, and here's why. Michigan is traditionally a blue state. President Trump was the first Republican to win there since 1988. But he did win by a razor-thin margin, fewer than 11,000 votes. Michigan is home to the bloc of blue-collar workers that delivered the election to conservative Ronald Reagan back in the 80s. Both Democratic and Republican camps are vying for this key group of workers that has the ability to swing the vote. As CNN's Jessica Dean explains, the Biden camp wants to shake things up in traditionally red states.
We're now entering the closing week of the 2020 presidential election, and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are hitting the campaign trail, going into states that really tell you a lot about where the campaign sees things right now. Joe Biden will be heading to Georgia later this week. That's a state that no Democrat has carried since 1992 when Bill Clinton carried that state. For her part, Kamala Harris will include Texas on her travel schedule. Again, Democrats haven't had any luck in Texas in a long time, but the Biden-Harris campaign sending Harris into Texas in his closing days, hoping to up their chances of carrying that state and all of its electoral votes come next Tuesday.
CNN Politics White House reporter Stephen Collinson joins me now to talk about all of this. We're going to start with the 5 people in Vice President Mike Pence's orbit testing positive for coronavirus, his chief of staff among them. And that follows, of course, the president, his wife, his child, and many others in the White House. How damaging politically is it for the administration, which is already, of course, fighting claims of mismanagement?
Well, I think what it does is that the administration and the White House simply can't get out from under this coronavirus pandemic. We're heading into the last week of the campaign. The president doesn't want to be talking about coronavirus at all, but he cannot escape it. And the fact now that the vice president is now in the middle of another coronavirus hotspot in the White House really advances the point that the Democratic nominee Joe Biden is trying to make. He's basically saying that Trump and Pence, the president and the vice president, can't keep themselves safe, can't keep the people around them safe. So how are they going to keep the rest of the American people safe? And that really plays into this issue of whether the White House's mishandling of the pandemic should disqualify the president and the vice president from claiming a second term.
How do you see it playing out on the electoral map? I mean, there's some surprising states in play.
I think what's very interesting is the fact that the president is playing defense on a lot of territory that he wouldn't want to be defending in the last week of the campaign. If you think about states like Georgia, Arizona, even Texas, where Democrats think they can do very well, even if they don't pull off that state at the end of the day, these are places where the president should have been strong and should have had locked up. Arizona, for example, in the Southwest is one of these classic changing states that are showing us the future of American politics. Big urban, suburban centers are changing states that used to be rural and conservative into swing states and potentially democratic states going forward, not just in this election, but in the elections to come. That's also the case with a state like Georgia, a real solid conservative state that's changing demographically and is coming into play. So the president is fighting not just in those big Midwest battlegrounds, but all across the map. And he can't really afford to lose many or any, in fact, of those big 7 or 8 swing states if he's going to get a second term.
You know, it's interesting because, you know, he has slipped with, you know, women, suburban women, of course, with even among some of the non-college educated whites. But the thing is, among the immovable base, you know, and many of them are the non-college educated whites and lower income people, and they're most affected by potential things like healthcare loss,
오늘은 쉬는 날이니까 지금은 여기까지만 하고 이따가 저녁 먹고 턱걸이랑 스쿼트하고 하겠습니다.
negatively impacted, and yet they are still loyal. Why is that?
I think in conservative politics, especially, and with, in particular, with this president, he's forged a cultural connection with many of these voters that supersedes some of the economic issues. You know, he has styled himself as the voice for the forgotten American, people who feel that they've not been